Unconventional circumstances sometimes requires unconventional means. If you're like me, chances are you did not learn in school a number of the most helpful tools and methods that you as a project manager have probably faced in delivering on critical milestones. Um, to give an example, a number of years ago, I was managing a team. On the team, we had about 6 people, all professionals, contract based. Deliverables were defined, project scope was in place. We had a good plan. We had a tight timeline. Everything was a green light. We had the resources in place. We had the skill set, and we'd already promised, to deliver by a certain time. Probably about a week before everything was due and most of the project was complete, some unknowns came into place that really threw a wrench into our project. In fact, it threatened it critically. And, you know, me being the project manager at the time, it was basically my ass that was on the line. I was responsible to make sure that everything was delivered. So at the time, the only thing I could do was go to my team, tell them as much as I could about the circumstance, and just hope that everybody could pitch in. In that particular situation, it worked out. The client was one of the largest technical publishing companies in the States. We had on the line goodwill. We had successful projects with them previously, so we had their goodwill. We had further business lined up. But, if we failed to deliver on that project, we stood the chance of, losing that contract, the gains, incurring the expenses, and not getting any more business. So that was a big deal. In this video, I'm going to be discussing really important tools and methods that you just won't have covered. Most of you have probably never heard of this or have come across this in school or in the workplace. In the particular situation I was in, my team was fantastic. They came together. We ended up working. I think everybody on the team probably pulled about 16-hour days, and we got it done. But the thing that threw a wrench in that project for us was one of the individuals that was responsible for a sizable part, an important component, had taken an unorthodox approach. Sometimes an unorthodox approach or an unconventional approach is good as long as it doesn't bend corners the right way, doesn't break important laws or rules, and it provides for delivery. But in this particular case, this person had made some choices and decisions that were inappropriate, and it would have rendered our project invalid. In other words, the deliverables we would have provided would have been unusable to the client. And it was just ignorance on their part. Seasoned professional, senior person, had done, this kind of work for years and years, but they were under a personal crunch. They had, I guess a few bad days, and that's what happened. So what we're going to talk about is, when you're a project manager and you're using a variety of conventional tools and metrics, sometimes these don't really help you, weigh, analyze, or forecast things outside that box. And so we're going to be talking about some things that are really outside the box here. And from my own personal experience, I wish I had been shown this years ago. Upon using these tools and methods, it's made my life a whole lot easier. I've seen time and again when this information was available and it wasn't used, that sometimes events of a catastrophic nature in relation to the project occurred. And I've seen situations when this information was available and it was used, that everything went smoother, much higher degree of success. But these topics are unusual. There are very few people that are using it. the tools and methods, to a large extent, on principle, are used by a small fraction of those trading financial instruments. But for some bizarre reason, it really isn't being applied outside of that realm. Within that realm, you have a number of people that are doing trading, commodities, currencies, and some of them do quite well if they understand and master these tools. But these principles can be applied if you're in a situation, if you have a critical project and you cannot afford to miss critical milestones, and especially if you're an executive and your position is dealing with senior, educated, professional people, then this is really going to be super helpful. I'm going to just cover some of these in brief. One of the problems that you face is that the metrics that are being used are measuring quantitative units over a span of time. But a lot of times the issues that will come up that can throw your project off track, cripple it, extend the timeline for delivery, or even cause the project to fail, are qualitative properties of circumstance of a personal, individual nature, circumstance of changes in the environment. And with the average tool set that a project manager has at their disposal, they don't have the means, framework, or ability to forecast these qualitative properties in advance. However, there is a way to do it. And when we take a look at the chart in front of us, we're looking at measuring qualitative properties of an individual that could be on a project over a span of time. And one of the things I want to impress upon you is that for yourself or any individual member on the team, or for the nature of the project itself, qualities of this can be measured over time. So looking at this particular chart, we have it color-coded with certain properties. And I want to also describe to you how this can be blown up. You'll see that in this chart we have peaks and troughs. And so some of these nodes are quite high. So when we're taking a look at mental acuity, we see that for this individual at this span of time, their mental state is at the highest. So that means they can take on a more critical workload that requires mental ability at this point. And usually when this is on the uprise, the curve is on the uprise, this is when they can take that load. And when they're on the downset, or the curve is going down, this is when you want to offload that work from them. But with these peaks and nodes, you'll see that the span time is in broad units. But we can actually drill in on any point along this timeline. Here we're looking at the period of a month. So these are the qualitative measure over the period of a month. But we can actually zoom in on any of these points for an individual. And in this case, what we see is a qualitative measure for the day. And we can measure different qualitative states. So as an example, I take a look at their mental acuity. I can actually zoom in on that single property, mental acuity, for the period of the day, and find out when are they actually in that peak state for the day itself. So we zoom in from the period of a month right down to the day, and we can see where that workload is going to start to undergo crisis. So here we see in the afternoon towards evening, it's waning, and then we've got our peak set here. And this will change from day to day. So if you're in a situation where you've got a critical work member, an employee that's say working in the field or on a really important task, you can know in advance when to get them to execute a certain kind of action. Now, another thing that's really interesting is that we can also take a look at the function of a team together over time. Super helpful, because if we're taking a look at a qualitative measure, we want to see what will their mental performance be like over a span of time. We can actually take a look at what that cycle for each person is. And this becomes important when you're forming a team on a given task, because you'll know where the weak link is. You'll know where that weak link is and when it occurs in advance. You can also sum this activity. So if this is the span of a 1-month project, we see that right at the beginning of the project, we have a major problem. So we need to allocate resources and make adjustments in relation to that issue. And we can also track it down to which of these individuals the crisis is coming from. This becomes helpful for the project manager, because when you have access to this kind of a resource, it lets you pick individuals where the best chemistry and the best performance for any given time period exists. So if I see that person 2 and person 4 are a weak link in the chain, I can swap them out with individuals. And what we do here in the sum activity at the bottom is we can see where the best performance lies. And if any of these individuals are not suitable for the team, like as an example, we see that person 4 and person 3 have the greatest stresses on them. Person 1 and person 2 are the most stable over time. Person 2 has an issue of criticality at the beginning. But these two really sync well over time. This individual, we see that there's a major problem between them and person 1 and person 2. They're just not really in sync, and they're not in sync with person 4. And we see that that's occurring at this point in time. So these are tools that can be really helpful. We can also view this not just as a line graph, but we can also view this as a color code, so we can get like a quick reference point. In addition to this, keep in mind that in this video we're covering individual fluctuation of specific qualities over a time period, and that we're also talking about group performance over a time period. But we can also take a look at environmental factors. So we can zoom in and determine in advance. In this particular case, we can see that there is a critical environmental influence occurring within this time range. And what I've seen happen is with this particular tool is that environmental crisis really clocks well to this this tool, this instrument. I mean, you see it, you experience it. Equipment breaks down, tempers flare. People are making poor decisions. It's the most remarkable thing to see this play out. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is when we take a look at a zoom-in scale for a certain kind of quality, in this particular chart, the individual is represented in the top bar chart. And then what we see here is a background environmental influence. So this secondary layer is actually showing us resistance and some, positive flow of that qualitative state. So we see that for this particular day, there's a lot of resistance environmentally. And this will tend to play out as a breakdown in group cohesion. So on this particular day, if we're taking a look at an individual and the quality of that individual, this individual is doing well during this block of time, but they're also up against an enormous amount of resistance. So these are tools that I use on a regular basis. There's a lot more to this. I'm just giving you the basic idea of what's possible. In the comment section of this video below, you'll find a link if you'd like to learn more about what this is and how it works. You're welcome to click that link, and I'll keep you updated. More videos will be released, and I'll be going into the dynamics of this. And this is something, like I said, I really wish I would have known about, because unlike any other, I'm just not aware of conventional mainstream project management tools out there that actually give me a window in advance so that I can forecast crisis individually, or for a team or a group, or potential crisis in the environment. So like I say, this is, extremely meaningful to me. The clients that I serve, they're repeat clients, the professionals, they use this on a regular basis. every month, and it makes their lives a whole lot easier to be able to anticipate, crisis, before potential crisis before it happens. And one of the things I have not covered in this video, I will cover in following videos, is we can often get, along with this forecasted information, insights into the nature of the kinds of crisis, specific characteristics of the nature of the crisis, and then that gives us a chance to prepare in advance. Just because a potential crisis may be indicated, it doesn't mean that we can't manage and navigate through it in a better way. So even in this day chart, we might see that there's a lot of resistance in the environment here, but we can also get an idea as to what is the nature of that. To use this information strategically and tactically, knowing, basically, what the peak performance time windows in advance are, and also what the potential crisis windows in advance are, that in and of itself is helpful. As an example, we would know not to, overload the team or this individual during these times because the chance of failure probabilistically goes up. But we can also get an idea as to what's the causation and what's the best way to address this by understanding the qualitative properties of what that resistance or crisis is. But I'll discuss that more in following videos. And again, if you want to stay updated, you want to learn more about this, go to the link in the comments section and we'll go from there. Thank you for your time and attention.